What what is the audience for this message? Please, what is the audience for this message? It's the MAGA crowd. That's the audience. No one else will listen to this and sympathize with anything that she is saying except the MAGA crowd. This is just far right propaganda. Plain and simple.
When the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part.
Kim Iversen, the reactionary anti-establishment tanky that now has a massive audience thanks to co-hosting The Hills Rising, went on a rant in a recent video that definitely crosses the threshold of defending white supremacy. So let's watch this video because it's incredibly disturbing how someone like her, given her takes on these issues, as well as some other takes like her anti-vax views, is allowed to have such a huge platform.
Crumbley is being charged as an adult. He is currently facing 4 counts of first-degree murder, 7 counts of assault with an intent to murder, 12 counts of possession of a firearm in the commission of a felony, and 1 count of terrorism causing death. And I want to take a moment and focus in on that last charge of terrorism, because it was, as we pointed out on the show yesterday, this shooting could be used as an opportunity to address some real issues our country is facing concerning gun laws. Yet instead, this shooting is likely going to be used to politicize and demonize, quite frankly, white people and Trump supporters instead.
Whoa. Just whoa. I mean, think about this. Is there a reason to demonize Trump supporters and white people, or rather, I think what really they're referring to is conservative-leaning white people, especially Trump supporters? It's not like they haven't done anything recently to justify their already existing demonization, which I think is very justified. I don't know, perhaps because they, broadly speaking, supported the January 6th insurrection, perhaps because they continue to deny that the election results were legitimate, perhaps their QAnon conspiracies and other crazy things that they believe in, perhaps their anti-vax stance. I don't know. Maybe just saying it, possibly they've been demonized for all the good reasons, because they are fucking demons. That's what they are. Holy shit. I mean, this is crazy. This is like, oh my god, if it weren't for this, they surely they are just innocent human beings. Come on.
First of all, the charge of terrorism is no doubt going to be exploited all over the news and social media without any real explanation as to what the charge actually means. It often has nothing to do with what you and I associate terrorism with.
So she's posting basically just like random Twitter comments. None of this is like an official news headline or anything. None of these people have blue checks. She's just like plugging in just random. Like, I can make a case about anyone saying any bad thing or having bad takes just by taking complete internet randos, which is kind of what she's doing.
Charge of terrorism often means you have caused people to feel terror that may leave them feeling paranoid and traumatized. County prosecutor Karen McDonald said this about the terrorism charge against Crumbley. What about all the children who ran screaming, hiding under desks? What about all the children at home who can't eat and can't sleep and can't imagine a world where they could ever step foot back in that school?
That kind of is terrorism. That kind of is. Now, I know that the grand majority of school shooters are people who have some serious psychological issue or trauma. But the fact is that causing like school shootings do cause terror in much the same way as, for example, what people typically associate terrorism with, like Islamic terrorism, which makes you afraid to get on a plane or be in an airport or in a crowded area. That's the whole point of it, to make you afraid, to do certain things that before these attacks you would not be afraid of. And the same thing with school shooters. Kids in the US are now afraid to go to school or to be in school. It's not a safe place anymore. It's the only country that I know in the world that has like school shooter drills, and this is normal. So yeah, this kind of is terrorism by that definition. If you insist that the terrorism have a political component, then yeah, it isn't. But from a psychological perspective, by that definition of terrorism that she just gave, yeah, I think it definitely is.
The purpose of this particular charge is to bring justice to those who maybe weren't shot, but who are suffering emotional trauma from the events, people who are terrorized. It's not the same as domestic terrorism or foreign ISIS-style terrorism that requires a political motive. But my guess is we can expect this isn't going to be overtly explained in the news. They'll say he's been charged with terrorism, and rather than explain the nuance in the meaning, they will then turn the conversation towards the growing threat of domestic white terrorism in America and leave the audience.
Which is real. This is real, by the way. The grand majority of terrorist attacks and mass killings in the U.S. over the last couple of years, or at least most of last decade, have been from right-wing extremists. That is not in dispute.
Audience to think this attack was motivated by Republicans who support Donald Trump. And why do I think this? Because it's already being done. Look at this tweet from Keith Olbermann. This kid died to stop a school shooter whose mother echoed the Trumpist fascism of Stool Presidente and Barstool Sports. Keith Olbermann cites an article by the Daily Beast that claims though Crumbley's father's social media posts weren't political, his mother penned an open letter on her blog to Donald Trump after he won the election in 2016. In the post, she appreciated Trump being a bad public speaker, saying it showed sincerity and humility. She said she didn't care about his tax returns and whether or not he did or did not pay some taxes because the fact the government can even lock people up over not paying them is corrupt in and of itself. She said she hoped Trump would really uncover the politicians for what she believed they really are and hoped they might shut down Big Pharma, make healthcare affordable for her and her middle-class family again. She said she supported the border wall and thanked him for allowing her the right to bear arms. That as a realtor who shows homes to people, she appreciated the ability to protect herself.
By the way, the parents have been charged as well, which is quite a rarity, but they have been charged. So there's more to this story than what Kim is explaining here. But look at what she's just basically she just rehashed practically her own political views in this last 30 seconds. Like all of what she just described is the crap that Kim Iversen believes in. That's why she's so triggered by this. This is personal to her because they basically have the same ideology. If you go look at her Twitter profile, just look at her Twitter history. Look at her statements on things like vaccines, etc. That's pretty much her as well. She's a far right reactionary that masquerades as an anti-establishment leftist. I don't think she calls herself leftist anymore, by the way, but that's her charade.
The fact the media is even bringing up Crumbley's mother's political affiliation shows us where they're headed with this. Rather than focus on how this 15-year-old was able to gain access to a weapon and focus on making changes to our gun laws, such as requiring ammunition to be locked away separately from firearms or laws that hold the registered gun owner responsible, we're going to use this event to demonize Trump voters, amplify this idea that white domestic terrorism is the country's greatest threat, and somehow devolve this into a race war by saying if he were any other color than white, he'd be dead, which is not true. The man who drove his car into a Christmas parade and killed numerous people is not white and not dead. And further evidence of this, look at the photos of Ethan Crumbley people on social media and some media outlets are using. He's now 15, and yet they chose this angelic-looking photo from about when he was 10. What is the purpose of this when there are several other photos like his mugshot that could have been shown instead? This same sort of tactic is used in reverse against black perpetrators and even victims. Rather than use their school photo of them smiling and looking like good kids, they use the meanest looking, most aggressive photo they can find on social media to portray them as villains. They attempt to portray them as people who either obviously would commit the heinous crime they did or victims who deserved it. They do this to placate a certain bias and mindset that the audience already holds, and the same looks to be happening in this case. Showing Crumbley as this innocent-looking angelic white kid is intended to stoke fear and support a narrative that white people, no matter how nice they look, are domestic terrorists who we should all be afraid of.
Oh my God, this is batshit insane. Like batshit insane. This is unbelievable how she does this. Like she goes on this, like everything she said before that last statement is fundamentally true. You know, she's pointing out the media bias in how they portray, black victims or perpetrators. It doesn't matter. They, if there's a perpetrator, they'll put the ugliest photo of them, and even if it's a victim, they'll try and find something nasty in their past. This is true. This is what the media does. And then she twists this into saying that the real purpose of this is to show that like the most angelic little kid can become a domestic terrorist. What the hell? What the hell? What is the audience for this message? Please, what is the audience for this message? It's the MAGA crowd. That's the audience. No one else will listen to this and sympathize with anything that she is saying except the MAGA crowd. This is just far-right propaganda. Plain and simple.
They are catering this message to a group of people in this country who already possess this belief. It's divisive and it's inaccurate in both scenarios. Rather than try to correct the wrongs and harms that have happened against one group, many in the nation seem more inclined toward evening the score and enacting revenge instead. This isn't healthy and this isn't helpful. The fact is, Ethan Crumbley took innocent lives and maimed others, and his motive is still unknown. And even if it comes out that he has a political affiliation or another, the only thing that matters is why he committed this crime in particular. The last thing we should do is paint an entire cohort of people as evil or people we should fear because they happen to share the same characteristic or belief.
That's not the argument that anyone is giving. No one's saying that this kid was like a Trump supporter or a MAGA supporter. The whole reason that they're bringing the parents up is because they were, MAGA nutters who raised a kid who was clearly screwed up in the head and was basically given, free the ability to just take guns to school. There was no restriction to that. That's the problem. That's why why it's important to bring up the parents and bring up the parents' political views, which she insists that should have no place in this discussion, because she and now she's doing exactly what the media always does, which is frame a white shooter as simply being mentally unbalanced. That's what she's doing here. So ironically, she's correctly blaming the media for the bias that they have in how they describe killers, their photographs, but now she's doing the same with intentions. She's basically saying that this guy was, his upbringing had nothing to do with it. His parents' political views and their views with regards to guns had no influence whatsoever in what this kid did, which is absolutely batshit insane.
We have issues with our gun laws that have nothing to do with whether or not you should have the right to own certain firearms. Common sense laws, like locking up the ammo separately from the firearm itself, holding people accountable who buy weapons and recklessly store them or allow others who are not registered to the weapon to have access to it. Our goal needs to be to save lives. So let's keep our eye on the ball. So I think this is going to be another case, kind of like Kyle Rittenhouse, where now, look, this guy's guilty. I think it's really obvious from all the evidence that we're seeing that this guy is very, very guilty, very different than the Kyle Rittenhouse case as far as the actual facts. But how they'll use it to fuel a narrative or a discussion or to demonize others. This isn't about Ethan Crumbley. Whether or not people want to call him a terrorist, that has nothing to do with him. It really has to do with this narrative that we're facing this white domestic terrorism in this country. This is our big problem. And
it is a big problem. It is. If you have to describe the US's main terrorist problem today, it is white, far-right, white extremists. That is a fact. That is a fact.
We've got to do something to stop it. And that stopping it has nothing to do with Ethan Crumbley. It will affect other people. And that is what I'm most afraid of on this.
Yeah.
By the way, note the Rising's obvious right-wing bias. And if this wasn't obvious when, Crystal Ball and Sagar and Jetty were hosting it, it's even more obvious now because there's 3 people who are constantly on this show, of which 2 of them are basically right-wingers, which is obviously Kim Iversen, and I forget this guy's name. The irony is that this guy is this guy's like openly, he's basically the Sagar of this iteration of Rising, yet he's actually more moderate in his views than Kim Iversen, who's supposed to be just like the populist without any obvious ideology. That is just how far to the right Kim Iversen is. And then Ryan Grimm, who just, look, I really like Ryan Grimm. I think he's a very, very good journalist. I have tons of respect for him. He seems like a really good guy. He takes a lot of shit from the Jimmy Dore crowd, which I think is thoroughly unfair. But dude, you need to quit this show, man. You really, really need to quit this show. Because by being on that show, you are basically legitimizing the person who's appearing to your left right now. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to be that guy. And honestly, he looks more and more uncomfortable as time passes. So my bet is that he's not going to be on this show for long. Maybe this particular video is kind of the moment when he realizes, like, dude, I just can't pretend that that this is just a normal narrative that we're pushing, and that he, I guess to some extent, is unable to fight back against, because this is not really a debate show. This is not a show where the left, and this is the problem with this show, that they don't debate each other. They don't call each other out. And that has been a problem since, like I said, since Crystal and Sagar were on board, and which gives people the erroneous impression that left-wing populists and right-wing populists want the same thing. And that's why that show is so fucking dangerous. Yeah, I would not want to be contributing to this narrative if I was Ryan Grimm. So, like I said, enormous respect for him. Really like the guy. But dude, you need to quit this show. Just, you really, really do not want to be a part of what Rising is contributing to.
When they use the phrase white domestic terrorism, so terrorism has become such a slippery term and ought to just be retired entirely.
Could you imagine any conservative saying that during the Bush era? Of course not. But now that it's white people at home doing it, let's just forget it's such a fuzzy term. What fucking hypocrites! This is just conservative hypocrisy at its worst. We're fucking hypocrites.
Probably even when we're talking about ISIS and other things, because trying to ascribe coherent ideology or motivations to people who commit mass murder is a tricky game, because people who commit violence and murder are often deranged or in some way deranged. So you're like trying to make sense of something that doesn't actually make sense. That's particularly clear in cases like this. Like, what is his ideology? He doesn't really have one. And then we go.
Again, it's not about the kid's ideology. It's not about the kid's ideology. It's about what his parents sort of groomed him into being capable of doing. I don't think the parents obviously wanted him to do it, but he was raised in an environment where this was seen, I guess, to some degree, an acceptable course of action, to which must be added his own, psychological issues or personality issues, whatever you want to call them. But this goes back to the definition of terrorism, whether there must be a political component to it or not, and I don't think necessarily it does have to. But yeah.
Looking for one because we want to find someone to blame and we want it to all make sense, but it doesn't, because violence is random and frightening and not explained by obvious, like, well, this person thought this, they read this, they came to this conclusion, and thus they did this. It doesn't work.
Violence is random. What the fuck? What the fuck? Violence is not random. Violence has plenty of motive. Like, there's so much literature on this, for Christ's sake. But look, everything that you've heard up to this moment plays to the ears of a far-right extremist. If you are a far-right extremist, whether you want to call yourself a MAGA, a nutter, or some other kind of reactionary, it doesn't matter. If you are from the right and you are listening to this video, this is music to your ears, because it's basically telling you, whatever white people do, especially conservative white people do, it's always because of their individual personality. But when it's non-white people, when it's left, or when it's leftist, if this is Antifa violence and this is all ideologically motivated, it clearly has a reason. Yeah.
Like that. What's also.
Anyway, I will leave it at that. And because sadly, Ryan Grimm does not push back on any of this. He gives a talks a bit about the prosecutor in this case, but he does not push back on this narrative, which again, this would have been the opportunity to push back, but I don't know. Like I said, I like the guy, but I also don't think that Ryan Grimm is particularly a combative person, and I think this is the moment when ideally you should have that kind of, you know, aggressive streak in you, and like, hey, you're talking bullshit. I'm gonna debunk this right now. I'm not gonna let this go unchallenged, and I don't think he has the personality for this. So there you go. Crazy, yeah. But again, why Kim Iversen has flown under the radar for so long, I'm not sure. But if you want to see a whole catalog of her fucked up right-wing reactionary views, just go on her Twitter. Just go back. Look at all the anti-vax shit that she's been promoting and that she also promotes on Rising. And just, you know, in this narrative, this right-wing populist narrative, basically the way that they defend the right is by pointing out the errors in the liberal critique of the right. That's all they do. And then by doing that, they paint the liberal establishment as the real enemies, and the right gets a pass. And you know, I'm also pretty anti-establishment. I don't consider myself a liberal, but you have to realize, you know, what the big threat here is. You have to realize, you know, who you're implicitly defending by framing these issues under these narratives. And you cannot frame this. If you want to go and attack the liberal establishment, which I am 110% in favor of everyone doing it, you have to frame it in such a way that the far right does not get a free pass. And they completely fail at doing that. That is the big problem with Rising. They fail at doing that. Rising and now Breaking Points, because Sagar and Crystal are doing the exact same thing on their other channel. So don't fall for this shit. This is not anti-establishment populist that brings left and right together. This is pure far-right propaganda. Do not buy it. So on that note, if you like this video, please like, please share, especially if you have friends who are fans of these shows. And don't forget to subscribe. And I'll see you next time.